Welcome to the first edition of Coach's Corner. That's kind of like the very generic name that we've put to it. But, we're just going to roll with it for now until we get a new name or a more creative one. Basically, the premise of this is, if you're watching this, you've probably seen my newsletter or my YouTube channel that I put out. I'm going to put probably about 2 to 3 interviews a week of me talking to a good friend, highlighting their coaching backgrounds and just kind of digging deep into some of the challenges that they face, some of the goals that they have, and hopefully some young coach can benefit from it as well. Today I'm here with a very good friend. His name is Menelik Fernandes. He has a very extensive background, so I'm going to get into that here. He was an AAU program director in Toronto, Canada, and a head coach. He was a York College assistant on the men's and women's side, also in Canada. He was a Fleming College lead assistant men's coach in Canada. He is now currently the Fleming College interim head coach, and also probably most famously known for his contributions to Rising Coaches and his show Run It Back, which is on Rising Coaches and on his YouTube channel as well. Menelik does a really great job, kind of putting on for the coaching community and being able to, just be a guy that you could be able to reach out to at any point in time. And he's always available for anybody. He never shies away from anybody, regardless of, how small or big you are. And really just somebody that I've grown really fond of getting to know just throughout the whole time of the extended quarantine, extended off season, and now a friendship that's led into, something that I hope will last for a really long time. But let's start. Menelik, how are you doing today?
I'm awesome. And Connor, thanks so much for the warm welcome. I'm humbled, and anything that you do, I support. So I'm really happy to be involved in the Coach's Corner, if the name sticks or whatever it ends up becoming. I've told you numerous times, man, you're light years ahead of where I was at your age. So when you say all those kind of things, like I said, it's really humbling to hear it coming from you, because I know your character. I know how hard you work. I know how much this means to you. So, hearing those words are awesome. So appreciate you.
I appreciate you, my man. So let's get into everything here, and we'll just start, kind of with your background and how you got into coaching. Was this something that, you always wanted to do, or something that you were kind of drawn to as you matured?
So it's an interesting question, and I like that you start there. Anybody who, as you mentioned, I'm involved with the Rising Coaches community pretty heavily, for sure. Much respect to them and everything they do for the game. But they did a member spotlight on me. So anybody who might have caught that will get a pretty intricate background of me. Like, I was pretty open and honest with all that. But for me, I had a decent high school career, didn't end up playing in college, was recruited to a few places, and just kind of decided that I wanted to do the party and youthful type thing instead, and went that way. And so, took steps away from basketball entirely. Became a salesperson, sold cell phones for 7 years, then became a real estate broker. I have my real estate license. I've been practicing real estate for 15 years now, and I've been running my own business for 13 of those 15 years. But somewhere in my early 30s, 32, 33, somewhere in there, I was like, you know what? Something is really missing. And what was missing was sport, the simplest way to put it, in that, like, I grew up around sport. I was a baseball player originally, and then, like I said, pretty competitive basketball player all throughout high school, letter winner, multi-sport athlete, all that kind of stuff. So sport was something that I knew, something that I understood, had spent a lot of money when I was younger, investing in basketball camps, investing in travel. And I just felt like I knew a lot about this game because I had been fortunate enough to learn from some really good coaches. So figured, all right, well, if I feel sort of empty from the day-to-day 9 to 5 thing, maybe coaching will help. And, delved into it as much as I could. I went back to my alma mater, my high school, and said, like, hey, I want to coach. And ironically, my old coach was there, and he was on his last leg, so to speak, and was like, please take over. So did a couple of years there. I got involved with a youth organization that I did one season of, we would call it rep basketball, but I mean, just basically something local. Didn't really like that too much, so I created Toronto Terror, became the director and head coach of most of the teams. Had something like 17 players go on to play in college at various levels, from Division One down to Canadian college type deal. And did the majority of that myself. Invested a lot of money in it, spent a lot of time in it, and really just kind of found happiness throughout it. And then because of the connection to Toronto Terror and having some players, but being in and around players a lot, when I started reaching out to universities and colleges, York University got back to me. They were one of the few schools. And the head coach, Tom Oliveri, took a chance on me. And Tom actually was somebody who used to run my practices when I was younger. So, knew I could play a little bit, knew I had a bit of a sense of the game, despite, what he'll trash talk and say now. He gave me a chance, came out, thought I did pretty well, spent 2 years with him. Then unfortunately he got let go. So I moved to the women's side at the same school under Erin McAleenan, who in my opinion is a phenomenal coach, really, really good basketball coach. She actually just very recently got the University of British Columbia, I believe it is, but she'll kill out there. She does well. And then after a year on the women's side, decided that I wanted to move back into the men's game. I went very briefly to George Brown, which doesn't really appear on my resume for most people, but I was only there for a couple weeks. And after a couple weeks, just sort of decided that wasn't a fit, went and pursued my master's, finished that up, and then headed out to Fleming. Halfway through the year, my head coach got fired, took over a team that was winless at that time, was about to have my first recruiting class when COVID started. And I think right now, I am currently setting the record for the longest interim tag as a head coach ever, because I'm somewhere in and around 17 months. But as a very long-winded answer to your question, Connor, sorry, it was not a calling. It was not something that I always knew I wanted to do. It was something that sort of filled a gap in, early adulthood, like, hey, something's missing, something that I'm familiar with, and then sort of became a calling. I always say, I had some coaches when I was young. One big one is a gentleman named Sidney Buckle. And my father passed away when I was 9. And Sidney was basically my father when I was a teenager, in that, like, me, his son, Sean, and another gentleman in Tariq, who we're all still friends to this day, but we basically lived at each other's house all the time, playing video games, talking trash, playing basketball in the driveway, all that sort of stuff. But the amount of time that the 3 sets of parents put in for us to come up can never be repaid. So the best I can do is pay it forward to other kids who have been in similar type situations and try and help them out. And I think that's what gives me joy about this.
That's awesome, man. It's really, I think, the most rewarding profession that you can be in, to be able to, find ways, especially even in any profession, to be able to build relationships with people and, be able to give back as much as you can.
For
But kind
sure.
of cycling back to your beginning, you mentioned you started out, high school, AAU background. So when you started out in the beginning, like, what did you feel like was kind of your biggest challenge early on, where you said, like, I got a lot to learn in this specific area?
Well, I mean, so the phrase that has always stuck with me, and I think it's actually from a baseball movie that I saw one time. It might actually be in Moneyball, but it's like, I think the phrase is, it's remarkable how much you don't know about a game you've played your entire life. So, like, when I first started coaching, I go back to my alma mater. It's a high school. They're one of the lesser teams in a very good division in Toronto, and we did well. We had a 75% win-loss record over 2 years. We made the playoffs both times, went fairly far in the playoffs one year. The one team that knocked us out actually ended up having like 6 players go to play Division One afterwards, type deal. So, like, we did okay. But, like, to answer your question, the challenges were like, and I think this is a major thing that a lot of athletes actually struggle with, is being able to accurately identify where your skill set is. So a lot of people, I came in bursting with confidence. I came in thinking like I knew everything. I had all the answers, type deal, because I had enjoyed success as a salesperson. I had won a lot when I played sport when I was younger, but to come in and coach somebody, to come in and get them to buy into what you're doing, to come in, I mean, even just putting together a conceptual offense or a static offense that's like, quick hitters or whatever, to have all the answers to get people to see it your way, it's a challenge. It's something that changes the scope of what you have to do. You're not just teaching, you're selling, you're relating to, you're building relationships, all the stuff that coaches know to be true. But you can't do those things if you don't eat a slice of humble pie. If you don't take a step back and go like, I don't have all the answers, let me go find something out. Let me look at it from a different perspective. Let me talk to somebody who knows more than me. Let me at least even admit to myself that somebody else knows more than me, and I should probably listen to him instead of telling him the way that it is.
Oh, definitely. I think that's really good. That was one of my biggest challenges as well, is like, came in thinking I knew everything in the world, and, you get hit hard by reality real quick.
Some guys will get you. You'll get that punch right in the face.
Right.
How do I fix that?
That's so, kind of speaking of that, and like you saying, that was being a challenge early on in your career. When you started, in the high school, obviously in the AAU game, like you were kind of, more or less being thrown into the fire when you started. Like you didn't really have the time to, sit back and just watch and, be an observer as much as you had to be right into coaching, correct?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
How did you feel like, do you think like, that was extremely beneficial to you? Do you think that, was something you wish you would have had?
So I'll be a coach again and drop another cliche or a dodge, whatever you want to say. The old saying is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So something about me that I recognized early in life, as I mentioned, I've had a pretty extensive sales career. I've never really played well with others other than team sport. So like in the business world as an adult, it's always like, I'm just going to do this on my own. I don't want to wait for somebody else. I was never the guy in the group project who was like, let's let somebody else do everything. I'd take a whole bunch of stuff on myself and then be like, why aren't you up to speed? Well, when it comes to basketball, in my opinion, there's definitely pros and cons to both aspects. So as I mentioned, I started my own organization and I was trying to do a lot all by myself. I was traveling a lot and we weren't getting, there's only so much talent in a place like Toronto, and there's some pretty big organizations that have got some of the best players for them. So I was getting some middle of the road players, let's say, and trying to develop them and win games against like supreme or ultra talent definitely takes time, and it takes like negotiation, etc. And I probably could have gotten a lot farther, a lot faster if I had joined another organization and played well with others and had the opportunity to watch, etc. But I think, to answer your question as best as I can, there's benefit to both methods, and it's really a matter of what's right for you. So if you're the kind of person who's a self-starter and likes to work hard and likes to take on a lot, I would absolutely recommend doing it the way that I did. If you're the kind of person who's like, I want to learn from the best, I want to get ahead pretty quickly, because I mean, everything is coaching network and who type deal. You're quite a bit more likely to take further steps faster if you're associated with a big name club. And I think that holds true probably all over North America. So there's benefits to both. The way that I did it, I think, was right for me. And it just meant that on certain things, I had to pump the brakes and slow down and watch as an outsider instead of being part of those bigger organizations.
Oh, definitely. So, you kind of speak to like your time at AAU and stuff, and you starting up your program. And AAU is obviously, I mean, I'm sure it is in Canada as well, but it's a really big part of, the culture of a young kid in high school basketball, so to speak, and, their recruitment and everything. And like where you're kind of starting this AAU program, right? You're kind of starting it almost, I don't know how deep you were into your coaching career at that point, but it sounds like you're going into it, just with like a couple years under your belt, if not less. Like, how were you able to, find guys to be able to play in your program? Because I know that with our guys, we have program directors, coaches, and like they've kind of been around the area for a really long time. Like they
Right.
know the lay of the land. They might have been a high school head coach, high school assistant, whatever. But like that seems like would probably be a really big issue as someone just, trying to get started and everything. Like it seems like that would be a pretty big challenge if I'm not mistaken.
For sure it was. So, I mean, uh, the biggest thing too is that up here, like, I don't know if it's the same in your particular state. I know it varies from state to state, but you can't coach high school if you're not a teacher, unless a teacher is always there with you. And that was a real challenge at the high school that I was at, because not a lot of teachers really wanted to take the time to do the extracurricular for basketball. So I couldn't even really pull so much from that school. The way that I went about it was I reached out to some people that I knew from when I played. I mean, many have probably heard the name Roe Russell. Roe is kind of like the godfather of AAU basketball in Canada. Most people that have made it Division One, and I literally mean that. In the past 20 years, most people that have made Division One basketball have some sort of tie to him. So grassroots basketball was his program. I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, I don't know if you really remember me. You coached me at this camp in the 90s." And, to his credit, he was like, "Absolutely remember you, 100%. Let's sit down. Let's have lunch." So he sat down with me. He gave me some advice. He gave me some strategies to look at, that kind of thing. Then another gentleman who actually coached me when I was younger is the head coach of the Prince Edward Island team in U Sports Canada. His name is Daryl Glenn. Uh, Daryl was one of my coaches when I played for the Scarborough Roadrunners way back when. And I reached out to him, same thing, just like, "Hey, I'm in around this. I'm kind of doing the high school thing. I want to take steps with AAU. I want to take steps with college. How do I do it?" And similar, absolutely just donated his time, went to lunch with me, stayed in touch, gave me all kinds of tidbits. So they presented some strategies. And I mean, the basic strategies were get your name out there as much as you can, work. So we don't have the same restrictions on, if you end up being with a college or whatever, you can still work camps in the area. So I worked a lot of camps, as many as possible, for sure. And then, I had some guys that came over. I mentioned I started with one organization prior to starting my own. I had 4 players come over from that. And then they brought some players, and those players brought some players, and it started growing. And then I had a couple kids come from the high school that I coached at. So before you know it, I'm in the gym with, 28, 30 kids pretty regular. And, at first you're not making very much money from your program, right? And like, I know ultimately the goal of most of these programs is not to make a ton of money, but like, if you're not sponsored, you need to make money in order to survive. So I was obviously still working full-time as a realtor, but like any chance I could, I would self-promote, right? So like, if I went and was showing property and they had a kid that was the right age, like, "Hey, bring them out. Hey, don't worry about costs. We'll cover that for you." But like, all that kind of stuff. In fact, some of my real estate advertising was like, buy or sell your house and your kid will play for free type deal. So there, just anything that kept it out there that like I was involved, I was around. And, I advertised, you've probably never heard of it, but like On Point, which is my friend Drew runs that. And they have like 30,000 followers, I believe, and like 1 million views on YouTube or whatever. I would pay to do some advertising through him, and it would get kids in the gym. It wouldn't always be the kind of talent that you want, but you would make do, and you would build, and started an Instagram and started a Twitter, and those things, they all helped. They all, perpetuate it. And you have to have patience. You're going to have some practices where you have 2 or 3 kids. That's what it is. And then you're gonna have some practices where you have 30 and 45 kids, and you're like, "Crap, I need help." Like, so it's an interesting place to be in. But I mean, I think organically would be the best way to say or describe how it grew.
Okay. So now shifting to your college career where you were at, York and Fleming now, you know, you coach both on the men's and women's side. Do you feel like, that's kind of been beneficial to you to be able to see both sides of the ball? Or, would you have rather stayed in a certain, men's, stay strictly women's?
So I prefer being on the men's side. I do. However, my experience at York on the women's side was great. So at the time, I believe Aaron actually beat it 2 years after I left, but at the time we had won the most games in a regular season for York's women's team in like 12 years. So, really good turnaround. And so she had started on the women's side in my first year on the men's side. So I watched her grow it from like 2 wins, 4 wins. Like we had 11 wins and went to the playoffs. And then like 2 years after I was there, she ended up winning her first playoff game. So, I mean, it was organically growing. But like the women's side, I always say this, it is a different game without a doubt in that like, nobody's for the most part dunking the basketball. Nobody's vertically spacing, but it's even officiated differently. So there's different intricacies that you have to learn. Like, I hate to say it, but up here, like they call a jump ball much faster than they do. Like, I don't know if they have some sort of like thought like, oh, the women are going to hurt themselves or something like that. But it would be something that those little kinds of things we would zero in and we would try to coach around those things. Like, well, we can wrap girls up easier. And if the arrow's to our benefit, why not just go do that quickly? Like there's different intricacies that you have to learn for sure. But I think the women's experience, what I would, always covet, so proud that I'm taking away from is Erin was an excellent coach. I always say it. I will always give her credit for that. I always knew what she wanted to do, and she trusted me a lot, which was an awesome experience because I was only a few years in at the college university level. So I had a lot of responsibility and, like all four coaches, so Lexi and, oh my goodness, sorry, I'm forgetting her name. Emily Hazlitt was a former player who was there. All four coaches, like we trust each other. It was a great bond. So that was an excellent part of the relationship. But it's the only team that I've ever been part of where our best player was our best player. So we had a player named Lindsay Shotbolt, who was a transfer from Carleton University. So she played 4 years there, and she was a grad transfer doing her teacher's college with us. And the girl was phenomenal. Like she was our best player by far, 20 and 10 type girl. But she won every drill in practice all year long and held people accountable, never dropped to compete, always in people's face if they weren't at high level type deal. And to be part of an atmosphere like that is just it makes coaching so much easier, and it makes me understand what I want to strive for all the time. It's really hard to be a good team if your best player's not your best player. So it was overall a great experience, and nothing detrimental or negative came from being on the women's side. So I think to go back and answer your question again, I think it's definitely an experience that I'm proud of having and glad it's part of my resume.
Was there anything specifically besides, your best player, obviously, being your hardest worker, being a big leader? Was there anything specifically that you learned that you felt like, I can take this away when I go back to the guy's side?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, Connor, it's not a question that I can answer succinctly. When I state that Erin McAleenan was a good coach, like there's just so many things that she did that I valued. And like, don't get me wrong, like my experience on the guy side, same thing. Like Tom Alla, very great coach. My associate head coach was a gentleman named Jared Carlson, also an excellent coach, like a savant around basketball. But like the way that Erin organized things, the way that she put together practices where it was like, okay, we have to modulate volume intensity based upon where we are in the season, based upon how close our games are coming up. We have to have these scouts done by these days so that the players have this amount of time with it. Like it was a lot of hard work. Everyone was really dialed in, and it was more than anything always really organized, where it was like each of the drills that we were doing were specific for what we were doing that week. And it was the first time that I had been part of not having practice be like rote memorization where it's the same, 25 drills that you do or whatever all week long or whatever. It's, we need these 15 drills this week, but next week we need these 11 drills and we need to spend more time in that. And the coaches would always meet consistently and try to come up with new ideas. And even if we would stagnate and not have good ideas, we were in that think tank trying to get better, so to speak. So there was a lot that I brought from that experience that I thought for sure would apply to the men's side. And so far my experience has been, it has.
Nice, nice. I know that that's interesting that you speak of like the drills and stuff. I know that there's so many programs that just cycle around the same drills. But I think
Yeah.
it's pretty cool how you guys are kind of like you said, you're thinking about it, you're getting better. Not everything's going to be perfect, but that's all a part of the process. That's all about how you get better, and really being able to do that, with a collective group as a team and a staff, like you said. I think that's really cool.
I
Um,
think so. I do not subscribe to the idea that the team with the best players always wins. I think that there are things that you can do to work around with it. They probably win the majority of the time, but they don't always win. And I think that on the women's side, more so than the men's side, in my personal experience, you can make a greater difference with tactical decisions or with game planning decisions, et cetera, to overcome difference in ability. Because like we beat some teams that it was like that team is better than us, but we won the game. And I saw that more frequently on the women's side than I did on the men's.
hmm. That's an interesting element. I think that makes sense in my head, but I'd definitely like to hear more about that when we get off this, because I think that's a really interesting dynamic. Um, but,
Coaching counts.
right.
We have to believe in it, right? Otherwise,
Oh,
what
for
are we doing
sure,
up here?
for sure, definitely. So going shifting from your time at York, now being at Fleming, when did that change occur? How did that occur, with you? First off, getting the lead assistant coaching job at Fleming College.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I was the year that I left York, I was briefly at a school called George Brown. I was there for about 2 or 3 weeks, and just decided that I was going to leave and finish my master's. So I sat a year out. I had a gap year. I finished my master's in like 13 months. So I really accelerated it. It might have even been slightly shorter than that. I feel for some reason now it was under a year. But I got my master's because in Canada, so there's two leagues in Canada. There's a college league and there's a university league, and there's exceptions to this rule, but for the most part, the college league is usually considered slightly inferior to the university league. So it'd be like our Division One and our Division Two, let's say. There's definitely going to be some college teams that can beat some university teams, etc. But so basically, I took the year off. I did a gap year, and when I was at George Brown, I had recruited 3 players within those 3 weeks, and one of them was a guy who had played for me at Toronto Terror, and he got affiliated somehow with Fleming. I don't really remember the story behind it, but he was asked to go and work out, and we were in touch. And I hit him up. I was like, "Do they need another coach?" Because they didn't have any coaches. So basically, through communication via text, the answer was yes, they did. But the school then posted an assistant coach job like a few months later, and I applied for that. And I let the head coach know, and then there seemed to be some sort of miscommunication there, which kind of left a weird feeling in my maybe something's not the way that it should be there. Well, Fleming was a difficult job to say the least when I started there. We filled a large percentage of our team through walk-ons. We didn't have much of a recruitment class, and the dynamic was strange. And ultimately, we won no games for the first half of the season, and I was asked to take over for the second half of the season, and we went 1-9 under me. So I mean, it's amazing to me. I get a lot of really good introductions from people, and Run It Back has obviously caught on a little bit. So some people really value and covet the stuff that goes on there. But in my opinion, that's really just I'm listening to really good coaches and asking questions from them. I went 1-9, so I mean, I'm nothing special in my opinion. But we did the second half of that season, we did raise our points per game by almost 6 points, and we did lower our points per game allowed by almost 5 points. So it was like a 10.5 point swing. So there was progress there. We were about to have our first recruiting class, but in terms of what happened, basically it was through a player that I had recruited to another school, and I was brought on. I was thankful for the opportunity to help out. Like I said, it was a bit of a weird dynamic that didn't ultimately end up working out, unfortunately. And when the head coach was let go, they asked me to take over, and I think I did a pretty good job representing the school. And as I said, I've told you privately before, and I've mentioned it once or twice. I was told that I'm the top contender, but the school is on a hiring freeze for the past year and a half or whatever it's been. So who knows what ultimately ends up happening there.
Right. So, obviously you have a lot of stuff going on. Like, you're an interim head coach, you do rising coaches, running back takes an extreme amount of work, full-time dad as well. How are you specifically finding time? And I know it's kind of a skewed question because of how everything's going on in Canada right now, but, how did you find time to be able to kind of balance all those things at once?
So I'm very fortunate that, like my mother is a tremendous support system. Like she allowed me to move back in and she helps with babysitting. So that's a massive deal. When she travels, I've had some very, very good friends be like, I'm willing to help out and look after your daughter when you have to go to practice late night or whatever. Uh, like my daughter's mother is involved, but like it's fairly limited right now just because of scheduling and all of that. So sometimes she'll go over there as well. But I mean, obviously my number one priority for sure is looking after my daughter. So that takes a tremendous amount of time. And the first thing that I always have to figure out is like where she's going to be, if she's coming with me or if she's got something going on there. As far as like scheduling and all that, I mean, this question, I think I've always been pretty good at time management. And I don't really always need to write things down or have a formal schedule, but the simple fact that I've been a business owner slash independent contractor for a large portion of my adult life, like if you forget to meet a client, you're not going to make money. Like, so it's the same thing with coaching. I mean, if you don't show up, your team's not going to get better. You're not going to win games. Ultimately, you're going to get fired. And that, I mean, I can't tell you how many coaches that I know negative stories about through players telling me stuff about like, hey, they didn't do this or they don't do that or whatever. And like for me, I don't think that exists. If guys don't like me or they don't like my coaching style, they definitely can't say, well, he didn't show up or he wasn't prepared or like, I mean, those things are always, all my coaches have got like a game plan. We meet a couple weeks or a couple times a week, and like the players get the practice plans in advance and they know whose teams they're on and the pennies are laid out and like all that kind of stuff just comes, I think, ultimately from being a business owner. And then, with the other stuff like running AAU and running the business and all that, it's just something you have to do. So you do it.
Makes a lot of sense. So, like, would you say like time management is kind of like the biggest thing that you felt like, you were able to take away from your business side into coaching?
For sure. Uh, I'm laughing a bit as you ask that question because I'm going to go coach on you again and throw another cliche in there. There's a famous saying by Michael Jordan that I love, and I quote this all the time. Michael Jordan used to always say, I've never lost a game. I've only ever run out of time. Right? Because if you put another 2 minutes on the clock, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to win that game. So uh, for me, I employ that statement. I take it to heart for so many things. But with basketball, guys know, like when I took over, I was like, look, we have 400 minutes of basketball left. And we're going to agree to play all 400 minutes of those. That is the commitment to each other. We're not going to give up. We have 400 minutes left. We're not going to play 390. We're going to play 400. And we had, I think it was like 31 practices left. We're going to get through all 31 of these practices. And we had 8 study halls left. We're going to commit to all of these 8 study halls. Like I'm really big on, like, I mean, we've spoken about this before. I'm a numbers guy. Numbers make all the difference to me. I mean, if you know, Jimmy Oakman's presentation recently, I think you were in it. If I get an extra 7% closing with my left hand versus closing with my right hand, you better believe I'm going to take that 7% and close with my left hand. Like that to me is just what this is all about, right? Like, we could talk mid-range jumpers till we're blue in the face, but I'm going to take that extra percentage every single time. And if they still beat me, great. I'll pat them on the back and say, good job. But like, I'm a numbers guy overall. So when it comes down to the time management aspect and everything, like I'm always thinking about, all right, well, if I only have 300 minutes and I need to be 70% better in the ball screen, then 210 of those minutes need to be dedicated towards working on the ball screen, because that's 70%, and that's what it's going to be. And I hope my math's right. I'm getting old, but that sounds about right now.
I'm terrible at math, so I can't help it.
But
It sounds
I mean,
about right to me. It sounded good enough.
but it's just the way that I think. And I think that it, like, as I said before, when you're a coach, you're either teaching or selling. So, my mom's a 30-year teacher. My uncles were all teachers. And then the majority of my family were restaurateurs, so selling. And I have a sales background. So I think that, like, getting into coaching is kind of this perfect marriage of, like, what my lineage is, in terms of, I've got this combination of teaching and selling coming together. So let's coach and see if that works out. But, like, when you're trying to sell a player on, hey, the way you do that is wrong, or the way that you do that is not the way that we need, I need you to do something else, having numbers and having the time that's required to back it up, I think helps a lot.
No, for sure. That I think, like you said, you spoke about, like your parents being teachers. And I just told you that my mom's been a teacher, I don't know, like 20, 25 years maybe. Um,
Right.
and I think that that's been, like I said, extremely beneficial as well. I think, being able to see how, they interact. And, like, I'm a big believer, and it sounds like you are too, for the most part, obviously with that intersection, but a lot of coaching is, you're teaching, you
For
know,
sure.
whether that's, basketball, whether that's non-basketball, whatever it is, you're spending a good amount of your time with your guys teaching. And I find it really hard to think that, like, you can be really successful in the coaching industry without being, a good teacher.
And I agree with you 100%. The interesting thing to me, and I hope I use this word correctly, but, like, I think that some coaches focus too much on the pedagogy, which I believe is, like, the teaching element of it, like, how do you do it, and not enough time on the implementation. And then some coaches focus too much on the implementation and not enough time on the pedagogy, the teaching element of it. And you need some sort of intersection of being able to do both. Like, I recognize that this guy learns like this, that guy learns like that, this guy learns like this. So now I have how I need to teach it, but then now I need to be able to implement it as well and put those things together. And I mean, it's going back to the very first question and the very first comment that I had, is, like, it's this ongoing process that has to really begin with humility of, like, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I need to learn a thing or two in these particular subject matters so that I can put these things together.
Mhm. Oh, definitely. And I think, like, so specifically, because this is a really interesting topic to me, and, going back on, like, this guy learns differently than this guy. This is how, trying to mix and match everything together and trying to find a way to, practically implement that. Um, I think that a lot of that can be learned from, your guys, and, like, knowing, like,
For
you
sure.
talking to them. Like, I've really learned the value of asking questions as a coach, and not, like, specifically to other coaches, but to our players, just to be able to get a better understanding of how their mind works. So I can try to, get into their mind and teach them how they need to be taught, and then implement the way that it needs to be implemented to them to make sense.
Well, I have so much respect for you saying that, because I come from an era, like, I played basketball in the late 90s, right? Like, so I mean, my basketball career probably wound down around 2000 when I first went to university. And all of the coaches from when I played were very much my way or highway type guys, right? Like, you didn't question the coach. It was coach was right no matter what. And there were a lot of times where very clearly it was like, okay, this coach is inferior. Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, or, like, whatever it is. And, you're a know-it-all smart player who's got a little bit of talent. You're going to question it a little bit more. But now it's becoming more commonplace for players to question coaches, and for coaches to have the correct answers for them before they allow them to coach them. Because, I mean, ultimately, that's what we're talking about a lot of the time, right? Like, you can have all the information in the world, but if a player who's a really good player will not let their guard down and hear what you have to say, then you're an inferior coach as well, right? And, like, that sucks, because there's a lot of instances where it's neither person's fault. Like somebody just didn't manage to build that trust, or somebody didn't manage to, let their guard down enough. But like at the end of the day, coaching is just like communication. It's a two-way process. I can only send this message out so much. You have to receive it as well.
Right. No. And I think, like I said, again, you hit on another point that I like. Where like, I feel like when you're asking those guys questions and stuff, and you're able to, have talks with them about what's going on and really get in their head, like now they're almost becoming, an active participant in what they're doing. Like it really makes them feel like included, like they're a part of it. Like, it's not, and there's always different situations and, different players, people respond differently. You might do something so many times and it might not work. You might have to try another way. Like, I'm not saying it's always the right answer, but, I've found that helps a lot more with players nowadays is like, they want to feel like they're included. They want to feel like they're a part,
Sure.
an active participant in, the process of them getting better, the process of them learning more about the game.
And the thing is too, is to kind of like, we can go off on so many tangents about this. Like, so like, we talk about transfer portal as coaches, or we talk about kids leaving one AAU team to play for another AAU team. And a lot of coaches have negative things to say like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're the captain of your own ship. So how, as coaches, can we always talk about like everything is about fit, but then when the fit is incorrect in certain instances, we chastise kids or coaches for that matter for wanting to change where they're at or for wanting to do something different. I see both perspectives. Not every situation is right versus wrong, and there's gray areas. And like if you're an outsider looking in, this goes back to the humility thing. You shouldn't always question if you don't have all the details. I've made that mistake before and I've learned from it, I think.
No, for sure. I've had a bunch of people tell me like, and I can't remember who the specific one was told me this line specifically, and I always thought it was really funny, but like it kind of holds truth to it. It's like, there's a million ways to do something, and it's only wrong if you lose.
Right.
Like obviously, different scenarios and everything, and you can go
Winning solves a lot of problems. We all know that for sure, right? Like
right.
those locker rooms are a lot better when you win, for sure.
Right. No doubt. So, getting on this tangent and stuff, we'll focus back here. And, just talk about yourself. Like, what are your goals? Like, where do you see yourself in, 3 to 5 years? What do you want out of your coaching path, kind of in the immediate future and then down the line?
I'll tell you something funny about this question. When I did that Rising Coaches interview that I mentioned, I said that like ultimately, I think this question is probably answered in hindsight, and that ultimately I'd like to coach at the highest level possible. I think I'm at a point in my life where I can refine that and blatantly just say, in an ideal world, I'd like to coach professional basketball, and I'd like it to be my full-time job. I don't want to work several other things, and I would go anywhere in the world to do that. Now, if that means instead that I have to remain at the college level, that's fine. No big deal. But I think more than anything, I don't want to do anything other than basketball because, patting myself on the back, I think I'm good at this from the perspective of I'm open to learn, I'm open to get better, and I work really hard at it. And I just, I know it exists in the United States as well, but the basketball climate in terms of being a full-time job is really bad in Canada. So, I ultimately want to probably coach the professional level. And as I said, be year-round and have it be my full-time job.
And so like with the platform you have, we talked about running back very briefly and you mentioned it as well, but with that platform and Rising Coaches, do you feel like you've really developed specific relationships that, you really enjoy or have helped you kind of get closer to where you want to be?
I don't know that they have ultimately got me closer to where I want to be, but so the history behind Rising Coaches for me is that one day I randomly saw one of their tweets about a conference in Charlotte, and I hopped on a plane and went down. And for anybody who knows me up here, they think that I'm crazy because to further my coaching education, I've hopped on a plane randomly and gone to Calgary. I've gone to Fredericton, New Brunswick. I've driven to Ottawa. I've gone to North Bay. I've gone to Sudbury, like all those kinds of things. I'm that kind of person where it's like, all right, I'm going to make it happen. But one of the things that I think has been a negative about me, or a shortcoming, is that I don't have a very large network. Partly because I started fairly late, and then also partly because, like I said, like I'm a does not play well with others kind of guy in certain instances. So one of the things that I have loved about being in the Rising Coaches community, but then ultimately developing this show, Run It Back, which has been basically therapeutic for me at this point. But one of the things that I've loved about it is I've met a lot of very good coaches, and many of them, not all, but many of them have stayed in touch after the show. So, I have some guys that I've tried to help out. I'll send them video. What would you do to develop this player? And it starts a conversation. Or I've had some questions about, like, hey man, the path to pro in your country, I've heard this and this, and we'll talk about it for an hour or something. And like, there's a few guys that I've joined multiple groups, one of which that you're in or whatever, via WhatsApp or through Group Meet or whatever the case might be. And I can't believe the wealth of knowledge that coaches are willing to share with each other, because, as I've said many times on Run It Back, it is very much not the case in Canada that is commonplace. Coaches are very much like, this is my knowledge, forget it. Like, go get your own type deal. And like, the group I'm in with you, Connor, like, every day I wake up and there's, oh, look at this great play, or, oh, look, this is what happened here, or like, look at the video on this. And I'm just like, this is awesome. This is where I parked my car. This is where I want to be, type deal. And, I'm in several groups now because of Rising Coaches, because of people that I've met through my show. People like Lamar Barrett, like Lamar, I know that you've met him, but like, LB put me under his wing, so to speak, and introduced me to his network of friends. And like Jimmy Oakman, same thing, introduced me to his network of friends, and we talk all the time. And like, there's so many people that I'm like, I can't believe that I wasn't privy to this before, and I'm so thankful that I am now.
Definitely. That's one of the best. I always feel like that's one of the best parts of, being able to do what we do, is just be able to find guys that, you know, really like will take time, no matter, like I said, how big or how small, to just talk to somebody, have a conversation. And like you
Right.
said, those groups that we do and we're in, those are super important. And it's crazy how many people, just like you said, have all this information available that, pretty much all of it's just put out there to share. Uh,
The funny thing to me, and this goes back to your introduction to me, is that, like, I mean, the gist of what you said to me was like, I've never big timed someone. Like, I'm willing to speak to anybody. But I feel that way about so many, like, there's so many coaches that I talk to that it's like, holy shit, that guy's a G League head coach. And he'll take my phone call and talk to me. Or like, this guy is a professional coach in Spain, Turkey, France, whatever it is. And he's like, why don't you try this and this and this? And then we'll have a discussion about it. I'm like, I'm not sized with that guy. So if that guy's willing to speak to me, why would I not be willing to talk to a GA or somebody like, hey man, when you do this, what do you do that? Like I said, the best, what this is ultimately, if you're in the coaching profession, like, people talk about servant leadership and all that kind of stuff. To me, it's ultimately, at the end of the day, it's pay it forward. Disseminate knowledge to those who are willing to listen to it, because somebody did to you. So pass it along.
For sure. No, and I'll leave you on this last question. Wrap things up here. It's funny. I told you, it's like we're gonna go like 15, 20 minutes.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry I talk too much. It's my fault.
And we're on like an hour now at this point. It's fine. I mean, I've enjoyed every second of it, but and I know other people will as well. But uh, wrapping everything up here, we talked about your goals. You said, you want to coach pro, and you kind of talked about the networking aspect to it. And but is there anything else that you're really doing to actively, achieve your goals? Like, I know you're always in every possible clinic. You're, always talking to as many people as you can. Is there any other kind of like tricks of the trade that you're looking for? Or is that just like you're trying to meet as many people and immerse yourself in as much knowledge as possible?
Well, I mean, so a lot of people talk about how in coaching it has so little to do with the applications that you put out. But like, before I was made the interim head coach at Fleming College, I actually had 5 head coaching interviews in Canada. So I apply for everything, and I try to get my name out there, and I try to get a chance to get in front of people. And just like you said, I am constantly trying to better myself. So I mean, whether it's not whether if it is Rising Coaches, Championship Productions, NABC, whatever state is holding whatever clinic, something international like Mike DeCracker's Zoom calls, or something that you'll hear about through someone else. Like I'm going to jump off of this and jump into another call after this, and then I'll get into Tommy's think tank beyond that or whatever, which is associated with Rising Coaches as well. But like uh, all those conversations, all those tools to better yourself are one thing, but I definitely cold call. I'm not afraid to apply for jobs that I've heard are taken. I'm not afraid to phone or email an athletic director and just be like, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. I've applied for this job. Coming from Canada, you may not have heard of me. Or, if I'm in Canada and I'm applying, like coming from, Toronto, and your job is on the East Coast, you may not have heard of me. I'm not afraid to get those things out there because, like I said, I feel like I'm putting in the work, and I get rejected a lot. That's fine. But it's part of the experience. And when you get through, you're no worse for wear, so to speak. Like, if somebody tells you no, you're in the exact same place that you were if you didn't ask. But if somebody tells you yes, you're miles ahead.
Oh, for sure. For sure. That's always the way I've kind of looked at it, is like, what's the worst thing that could happen? They say no. It's like,
All right.
it's like the old saying of like, like you're asking a girl out, like your kids are so afraid to ask a girl out at a young age. It's like, well, dude, what happens? She says no, she says no. Like you just move on, you move
Yeah,
forward,
and
you go to the next one.
in that scenario, if she says yes, you're a lot better off than you were when you didn't ask.
Exactly. Well, look, man, I'm gonna wrap this up just because truthfully, I think we're going on like an hour right now. But I really enjoyed this. Like I said, we talk a lot, but I always enjoy speaking with you, and I definitely prefer talking to people face to face. And like I said, make sure that you're checking out, Menelik's Run It Back show. I know that you can hit him up on Twitter, but I know that he's always available. Seems like he's always awake, and
this is definitely a constant comment for sure.
just an all around great guy, and somebody that I feel like has really bettered me. And I really, really enjoy and value the relationship that we've built over. Geez, we're probably going on a year now.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I was on one of the first Run It Backs. I remember that, and that was probably close to around this time, huh?
Yeah, it's got to be. Like I don't remember your specific episode number, but it's got to be like in the teens, and we're like 55, 60, somewhere in there. Yeah. So yeah. Amazing, man. Like same way. I mean, the proverbial pat on the back is usually how a lot of these calls end or whatever, but like sincerely, man, as I've said before, for anybody who's checking this out, Connor is light years ahead of his age, and just continue doing what you're doing, man. I know you love it. I know you work hard, and I have so much like respect for you. Like people don't know you basically live on your own in another state pursuing your goal. Like your family is somewhere else, and you're in a small place doing that student life. And I know there's lots of guys that are doing it, but like, good for you, man. Just keep on trekking with it. And I look forward to what this show is going to bring for you.
You too, man. Thanks a lot for coming on. Like I said, really enjoyed it. And, hopefully, everything continues to go smoothly for you, and, wishing you the best on, Run It Back, and, hopefully getting everything squared away in Canada, or, wherever life takes you, man.
Appreciate you, sir.